Hi, I'm Seth Meyers. I just shot my first stand-up special, Lobby Baby, and this is how I got started. I grew up in New Hampshire, Bedford, New Hampshire, which seems like maybe not a place where comedy would flourish, save for the fact that Sarah Silverman grew up in my hometown and Adam Sandler grew up one town over. So it turns out I was destined for this based on my early zip codes. I think comedy always just was held with very high value in our family. My parents met in Chicago in the 70s. They would go see Second City shows together. They considered comedy an art, not just something that was frivolous. I think they just shared it with us because it was something that they both loved. And I owe a great credit to my parents for this. I never watched stuff that was supposed to be funny for kids. My parents, at a very age-inappropriate time, introduced us to adult comedies, SNL when we were really young, a lot of Monty Python, comedy albums, Steve Martin, Richard Pryor, which that we were way too young for, but you might as well get it in your system early. No exaggeration, one of the greatest days of my life was being sick. And usually when I was sick, my mom would stay home from work. And one day, for some reason, my dad stayed home from work, and he went and rented Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and we watched it together, and the opening credits made me laugh harder than anything I'd ever seen. It was just to share that with him. For me, it was very important to try to make my dad laugh as hard as that was making him laugh that day. My brother and I started doing comedy sketches, I should say. Although I guess if it's high school, they're still skits. We used to do a comedy night in our high school where we would do impressions of teachers and things of that nature they were fun. That was probably the first time I walked out on stage with the purpose of it being comedy for an audience. And it was like a drug. I was at Northwestern University. There was an improv troupe there. I auditioned for it every year. I only got in my senior year, but doing that show my senior year, and at the time I had already started going to Chicago. I'd started taking improv classes, and I thought, okay, I certainly like this more than anything else I've learned at school, which is really unfortunate based on how much my parents have paid for it. But I'm gonna try to do the improv part of this as long as I can, as a job, see what happens. I think coming into Chicago in the mid-90s for me was this incredible time because the people that were on stage were about to basically be this hand that shaped the next 10, 15, 20 years of comedy, that you could see Amy Poehler and Rachel Dratch and Tina Fey and Horatio Sanz and Adam McKay and all these people who would then go on to write for early Conan and which then I think became a show that shaped what late night was for the next 2 decades. So it was really cool, and it took 10, 20 years before you realized exactly what the value of what you were seeing was. But obviously we thought it was funny, but I don't think any of us appreciated at the time. Oh, and all these people are gonna go off and they are gonna be the ones who basically shape the taste of comedy for the future. I was just doing a 2-person show in Chicago at this improv festival, and I was lucky enough that someone from SNL saw it. And they said for the audition, it should be about 5 minutes long. It should be a mix of characters and impressions. I put a ton of time into it. I put a ton of time into writing it. And I think ultimately being able to write is a really helpful tool when you're auditioning for SNL because you want to have jokes in the material. And to really timestamp it as 2001 for you, my impressions were Hugh Grant, Russell Crowe, and David Arquette. How about that? My favorite character at the update desk, that's gonna be Stefan. I mean, I don't wanna look down my nose at John Bovey or Judy Grimes, Kristen Wiig, shout out to Kristen Wiig. Olga Pavlotsky, that's a little Kate McKinnon for you. Oh my God, there were so many good ones. I think one that does not get enough attention for how ahead of its time it was Andy Samberg as Nick Cage doing Get in the Cage. And the most surreal moment in my time at SNL was doing Weekend Update with Andy Samberg as Nick Cage and then the actual Nick Cage. I had put no thought into what I was going to do after SNL. I had at the time been there 12 and a half years, and I had no exit strategy because I did. I was really happy being there. I was, for the first time, it was probably not until year 8 that I felt at home or comfortable. So, you don't decide to take these jobs, they kind of get offered to you. Somebody else decides on your behalf. And then you have to say yes or no, and it would have been crazy. The closer it got to making a decision, I realized I had had a really nice run at SNL, and this would be a a cool new challenge, and my fear was always that my job after SNL would be boring, and I didn't think late night would be boring, and it turned out I was right. The idea of starting your own late night show was just inherently tough, but the most fun part about it, and the part that I think we did the best job with, is you get to hire a lot of people at once. And, you know, the longer you have a show, the rarer it is to have an open writer's slot. Whereas in the beginning, you just have all these open slots and you can take these crazy chances and hire people who have little to no experience. And so it felt like the Old West in the beginning. I think that's true of anyone who starts a show like this, but it was a really cool and exciting time. What I enjoy most about having a talk show is doing the actual show, that hour. You know, people ask all the time what the best part about having your own talk show is, and I think well, there's two great things. One, every day ends doing a talk show, so it's very hard to put together a talk show. It's not that hard to do it. Like, the hour itself is really fun and flies by because you spend so much time getting it ready and building this weight-bearing structure that will survive for an hour. So that part, ending the day doing a show, is great. And the other part is we work with really great people, and so there's nobody I'm dreading seeing, and I've never worked at a place like that. I've been doing stand-up for a long time. I'd done it a few times where people from Netflix had seen it and sort of shown a little bit of interest. And then the act that I was doing on the road sort of coalesced into something that felt a little bit more like an hour as opposed to just like random bits of comedy. And once that happened, it seemed like a cool idea to try to just, commit it to the record. As far as touring, I went and did improv for a couple years in Europe. I did it in Amsterdam. It was as good a 2 years as I've ever had. Mostly just because there was this theater and you got on stage 200 nights a year. And you had an audience of Dutch people who, their English is really good. Their sense of humor is average. And so you just had to work really hard. I shouldn't say their sense of humor is average. I should tell you the Dutch are the most honest people. And they have never politely laughed at a single thing they didn't think was funny. You got the truest bouncer comedy in Amsterdam. I haven't toured a lot internationally as a stand-up. I'd like to, just because I like to travel, and that seems like the dumbest reason to do it. You're gonna go stand on a stage in a foreign country and see how it goes. But global dominance, anyone who knows me will tell you that that has long been a goal, is just to be a global brand. Pepsi, Google. No, it'll be interesting. Hey, thanks for watching. Check out my Netflix special, Lobby Baby, streaming now.